Welcome back to Think and Speak podcast. Today we're talking about one of the most common grammar mistakes English learners make, using was and were. Daniel, why is this topic so confusing?
Because was and were look simple, but they change depending on the subject. Many learners say you was or they was, and that immediately sounds incorrect to native speakers.
Exactly. These small mistakes can affect fluency and confidence. But once you understand the rules, everything becomes clear.
Today, we'll explain the past simple of the verb to be, how to use was and were in statements, questions, negatives, and even in conditional sentences.
If you've ever said, I were happy or she were late, this lesson will fix that forever. Stay with us until the end because we'll give you real-life examples, modern conversation practice, and clear grammar explanations. And before we begin, like this video and comment below. Which one confuses you more, was or were? Daniel, let's start with the basics. Many learners know that was and were are past forms of the verb to be, but they don't know when to use each one. Could you clearly explain the grammatical rule for choosing was or were? How does the subject affect the verb form? For example, why do we say I was but they were? Also, could you provide clear examples in positive sentences and explain the concept of subject-verb agreement in the past simple? Please make it simple but detailed so our listeners fully understand the foundation before moving to more advanced uses.
Excellent starting point, Emma. Let's begin with the foundation. Was and were are the past simple forms of the verb to be. In the present tense we say, am, you are, he is, she is, it is, we are, they are. In the past tense, this changes to only two forms. I was, he was, she was, it was, you were, we were, they were. This is called subject-verb agreement, meaning the verb form changes depending on the subject. Rule: use was with singular subjects. I, he, she, it singular nouns. Use were with plural subjects. You, we, they plural nouns. Examples: I was tired yesterday. She was at work. The movie was interesting. Now plural. They were late. We were happy. The students were excited. Notice something important. You always uses were, even if it refers to one person. You were right. You were my best friend. Now let's talk structure. Positive sentence structure. Subject plus was slash were plus complement. Example: I was at home. They were at the mall. The complement can be an adjective, noun, or prepositional phrase. Adjective: she was nervous. Noun: he was a teacher. Prepositional phrase: we were in the office. Understanding this structure is crucial because to be does not need another verb. It connects the subject to information. Common mistake: they was happy. Incorrect. They were happy. Correct. If the subject is singular, use was. If plural, use were. Once learners master this agreement rule, they eliminate one of the most noticeable grammar errors in spoken English. This foundation prepares us for negatives, questions, and conditionals.
That makes the rule much clearer, Daniel. Now let's move to negative sentences and questions. Many learners feel confused when forming sentences like, was she there? Or they were not ready. Could you explain how to form negative sentences with was and were? Also, how do we form yes/no questions and WH questions in the past tense using these verbs? Please include grammar structure explanations and real conversational examples so learners can practice speaking naturally in everyday situations.
Great progression, Emma. Let's move into negatives and questions. First, negative sentences. Structure. Subject plus was slash were plus not plus complement. Examples: I was not tired. She was not at school. They were not ready. In spoken English, we usually use contractions. Was not, wasn't. Were not, weren't. I wasn't tired. They weren't happy. We weren't late. Contractions sound more natural in conversation. Now, yes/no questions. To form a question, we invert the subject and the verb. Structure. Was/were plus subject plus complement. Examples. Was she at home? Were they at the party? Was it expensive? Were you busy yesterday? Notice that we do not use did with was or were. The verb to be forms questions by inversion alone. Short answers. Yes, she was. No, she wasn't. Yes, they were. No, they weren't. Now WH questions. Structure. WH word plus was/were plus subject. Examples. Where was she? Why were they late? How was the movie? Who was there? Example dialogue. Person A. Where were you last night? Person B. I was at a restaurant. Another example. Person A. Why was the meeting cancelled? Person B. It was too late. Notice how was and were describe states, conditions, or locations in the past. Common mistakes. Did she was there? Incorrect. Correct. Was she there? Where did you were? Incorrect. Correct. Where were you? Remember, with to be, never use did. Understanding negatives and questions helps learners speak about past experiences naturally and confidently.
Daniel, now let's move to something more advanced. Many learners hear sentences like, if I were you, instead of if I was you, and they become confused. Why do we sometimes use were with I? Could you explain the difference between normal past simple usage and the subjunctive mood? When should we say if I was, and when should we say if I were? Please give clear grammar explanations, modern real-life examples, and practical phrases that learners can use in daily conversation, especially for giving advice or imagining unreal situations.
Excellent question, Emma. This is where English becomes more advanced and more interesting. Normally, in the past simple we say, I was tired. She was at home. They were late. That's standard subject-verb agreement. However, in certain conditional sentences, we use something called the subjunctive mood. The subjunctive is used to talk about unreal, imaginary, or hypothetical situations. In these cases, we use were for all subjects, including I, he, and she. Structure of the second conditional. If plus subject plus were plus complement, subject plus would plus base verb. Example. If I were you, I would apply for that job. If she were here, she would help us. If he were taller, he would play basketball. Notice something important. Even though I is singular, we say if I were, not if I was, in formal or correct English when speaking about unreal situations. Why? Because this is not a real past event. It is hypothetical. It is imaginary. I am not you. She is not here. He is not taller. These situations are not real. Modern conversational examples. If I were you, I'd talk to her. If I were in your position, I'd quit that job. If it were cheaper, I would buy it. Now, what about if I was? In informal spoken English, some native speakers say, if I was rude, I'm sorry. This is different. Here, we are talking about a real possibility in the past. Maybe I was rude. Maybe I wasn't. It's possible. So here is the difference. If I was, possible real past situation. If I were, imaginary or hypothetical situation. Compare. If I was late, I apologize. Maybe I was late. If I were rich, I would travel the world. I am not rich. This distinction is important for academic and professional English. In modern spoken advice, if I were you is extremely common. It's a fixed expression used to give advice politely. Example dialogue. Friend A. I don't know what to do. Friend B. If I were you, I'd take the opportunity. Using the subjunctive correctly makes your English sound advanced and educated.
That explanation really helps clarify the difference, Daniel. For our final question, let's talk about using was and were in storytelling and descriptions. When we tell stories about the past, we often say things like, it was a beautiful day, or, there were many people at the party. Could you explain how was and were are used in descriptive storytelling? Also, what is the structure of there was and there were? Why do we say there was a problem, but there were many problems? Please give detailed grammar explanations and modern examples so learners can improve their narrative skills.
Wonderful closing question, Emma. Storytelling is where was and were become very powerful. First, let's talk about description in the past simple. When telling a story, we often use was and were to describe background information, settings, feelings, weather, atmosphere, and situations. Examples. It was a cold night. The restaurant was crowded. We were excited. They were nervous before the interview. Here, was and were describe states or conditions in the past. This is called descriptive background language in storytelling. Now let's move to there was and there were. This structure is used to talk about existence in the past. Structure. There was plus singular noun. There were plus plural noun. Examples. There was a problem. There was a long line outside. There were many people at the event. There were two options. Why? Because the verb agrees with the real subject, the noun after it. Singular noun was. Plural noun were. Compare. There was a mistake. One mistake. There were several mistakes. More than one. Modern storytelling example. Last night, there was a huge concert downtown. There were thousands of people. The atmosphere was incredible. Everyone was excited. Notice how was describes singular nouns, concert, atmosphere, everyone, and were describes plural nouns, thousands of people. Common mistake. There was many people. Incorrect. Correct. There were many people. Now let's combine storytelling elements. It was my first day at work. I was nervous, and my hands were shaking. There were many new faces in the office. There was a lot of pressure, but the team was supportive. Notice something interesting. A lot of pressure is uncountable, so we say there was a lot of pressure. Grammar tip. Countable plural were. Singular or uncountable was. Using these structures correctly makes your storytelling clear, natural, and professional. Mastering was, were, there was, there were, and the subjunctive, if I were, will significantly improve both your spoken and written English.